Okay, I just want to get this out of the way early in this review. This is easily one of the best sim rigs I've ever used. Now, if you don't have time to stick around for the details about the pros and cons of this sim rig, which I will get into in this video, simply go away knowing that this is a top quality rig. Yes, it does come with a pretty big price tag, but it backs that up with one of the most stable platforms I've encountered. As you may have seen from my previous Sim-Lab review, I've been racing a lot with the smaller brother of this sim rig, the GT1 Pro. Now that sim rig was incredibly capable and a great option in the mid to lower high range category, priced around $150 to $200 or euros or pounds cheaper than this P1X Pro. But the guys at Sim-Lab dangled this P1X Pro in front of me and I just couldn't say no. So here we are with another sim rig review, and this time around it's for the P1X Pro. I'll run through the pros and cons, of which there certainly are some. This is not a perfect sim rig by any means, but I'll run through all of that in this review. And I'll leave links to everything you see in the video description as well if you do want to check anything out. So let's jump right in. The Sim-Lab P1X Pro sits right in the middle of Sim-Lab's current lineup of cockpits. Below it is the GT1 Pro and the older GT1 Evo, and above it is the insane X1 Pro cockpit, which really is above and beyond what most sim racers will need in their home. Realistically, this P1X Pro is a top of the range 80/20 sim rig. It utilises huge 160x40mm aluminium profile along its base, the uprights are 120x40mm, and there are some puny 80x40mm strips of extrusion thrown in there for the shifter mount. Now, this P1X Pro costs from €785 in Europe, just over £700 in the UK, $850 in the States, and over $1,100 in Australia. That price will get you the cockpit and a choice of wheel mount, which there are 3 designs to choose from. You'll see that I have the integrated monitor mount on my setup as well, which is an additional £170, $200, along with some extra accessories such as the seat mount and slider. All in, everything I have here, which you can see, costs around £1,300. You can save some money by reusing an old racing seat, or by not opting for the seat sliders and integrated monitor mount, which would bring you back down closer to the original amount. Starting at the beginning of the journey, you get a fair few boxes, each containing various parts of the sim rig from the frame to the wheel mount and integrated monitor mount. Everything is well packaged to avoid scratches during delivery, and I really couldn't find any fault with this part of the process. Assembling the whole rig took me a full day, literally around 6 hours from opening the first box to putting on the last sticker. It's a full-on job which is easier if you've dealt with aluminium profile rigs before. The instructions are all online, so you'll have to keep referring to a laptop, an iPad or a phone, and I don't mind this. It's the way most sim rig manufacturers are going these days. The assembly process can be done on your own, but having a second person when adjusting things will certainly make things easier. I used my big boy pants and managed to assemble it all on my own with only a few minor injuries.
I got big boy pants on!
I got rewarded with a sticker and a lollipop from my wife, which gave me some sense of achievement. Now there is a lot of adjustment available in this rig, and making sure everything is positioned just right can be fairly time consuming. And while you are assembling this rig, you'll immediately notice the build quality. The whole thing is as solid as a rock once it's put together. Almost every bolt uses a nice 3D branded Sim-Lab washer, which really elevates the overall appearance. Everything's finished in matte black, which looks really premium, and there are no bare metal pieces on show. The only downside of this matte black finish is it's a huge fingerprint magnet. If you race with gloves on, perfect, but if you don't, keep your dirty mitts off this thing. It's also prone to scratching, especially while adjusting certain parts. I do really love the oval style of this sim rig, and that says a lot as I'm not normally a fan of 80/20 rigs. But Sim-Lab have been clever with the design of the P1X Pro by making those larger pieces of extrusion appear sleek by not including some grooves. and the addition of round corner brackets on the base really gives this sim rig a classy appearance. There are 4 feet included in the box, and these allow the sim rig to almost hover above the floor. This is ideal for people who like to run some RGB lighting around the underside, or people who may be sim racing on an uneven floor for whatever reason. Now I'm used to almost sitting on the floor when sim racing, so getting used to being more elevated took a little bit of time. Now you can see the stark difference in height when I compare this sim rig directly to the GT1 Pro. That rig has the same overall width and length dimensions as the P1X Pro, but the P1X feels so much bigger due to its elevated position and thicker frame. Now, as I do go further into this review, you'll learn that the P1X Pro certainly is not perfect, despite being incredibly good. There are other sim rig manufacturers that are doing some things that Sim-Lab should probably take note of. Nice little design touches like the height adjustment indicators on the inside of next level racing rigs can be really helpful when making adjustments, and most sim rig manufacturers actually include a shifter mount as standard. Now these criticisms won't help the P1X Pro at all, but I'm hoping moving forward, Sim-Lab will take note of these little touches in future releases. Now when ordering your Sim-Lab P1X Pro, you get a choice between 3 different wheel mounts. You've got the front mount, which is ideal for direct drive wheelbases like Simucube bases. There is the Fanatec DD mount for all things Fanatec, and the wheel deck. You'll see that I've opted for the wheel deck here as it's the most universal of all the mounts, which for me is ideal when I'm swapping between different racing wheels. This wheel deck is secured to the rig by 2 bolts on either side. These let you adjust the positioning and the angle of the deck. The only thing you can't adjust with this wheel mount directly is the distance of your wheel in relation to the vertical uprights. If you want to move your wheel closer or further away from you, you have to loosen all of the bolts holding the vertical supports up and move the whole upright section. Now this is a little annoying, as I had to do this a couple of times when swapping between different wheels. And this is when it is easiest to scratch the bottom of your sim rig. The good news though is that the wheel deck is pre-drilled for probably around 1 million different bolt patterns. This makes mounting your wheel incredibly easy no matter what racing wheel you have. I had a Moser R12, a Fanatec CSL DD and my Acertec Forte wheels all mounted to this wheel deck without a single alignment issue. Now the wheel deck itself is pretty thick to prevent any flexing across its surface. And you can see from underneath that it's got some extra supports that run from front to back to further stabilise everything. For those who are looking to mount any third-party wheel mounts to this P1X Pro, rest assured that it's just as easy as mounting an official Sim-Lab mount. Now moving down to the pedal plate, and you'll notice, well, the distinct lack of any actual pedal plate. Instead, we get some more pieces of aluminium extrusion. This may not quite look as pretty as a full pedal plate, but it does allow for some more custom mounting solutions. At the rear, you get a thick piece of profile that is not adjustable in any way. Then at the front, you get another piece of extrusion which can slide forwards and back. This combination should in theory let you mount pretty much any pedal set to this rig, as you're not limited to pre-drilled hole positions. While this let me mount my much loved Acertec Forte pedals with ease, it did mean the front of the pedals overhung the pedal plate a bit. Now this wasn't too much of an issue while driving. It does mean I don't have anywhere to rest my foot or heel off to the side of these pedals themselves. The real upside to this solution is the ability to mount almost anything anywhere, but also it adds a lot of stability. You'll see that there is zero flexing in this thing, even when I stamp on the pedals. Now the pedal supports to either side are fantastic as well. They allow for a ton of adjustment. Now you've got 2 slot gaps to mount through on each side. Combine this with the slot gaps in the extrusion and you can position these pedals pretty much anywhere. They also aren't mounted to the vertical uprights like they were on the GT1 Pro, giving you independent control over your pedal position and your wheel position. The only place you'll run into any trouble is if you want to mount your pedals really high up. I've got mine mounted pretty much as high as they can go at the rear, yet I'm still nowhere near a semi-formula driving position. The good thing with most Sim-Lab sim rigs is they always throw in a way of mounting your shifters and handbrakes, even if they don't actually include a dedicated shifter mount. The P1X Pro isn't any different, and it comes with a side mount included. This side mount is pretty lengthy, which is good if you want to stick a few different peripherals to it. And like most parts of this sim rig, you can adjust the height to find the perfect mounting position. The only slight downside is the lack of an actual shifter mount that is commonplace with other sim rigs. Unfortunately, that's a paid add-on if you do want a dedicated and adjustable mount. Now, you'll see that I've opted for the integrated monitor mount as well, going for the single monitor option, and this is fantastic if you like to keep things minimal. Now I say minimal because by integrating your screen into your cockpit, you no longer need a freestanding mount, which takes up extra floor space. But there really is nothing minimal about this mount's design. It's chunky as hell, and really fits with the whole aesthetic of this P1X Pro. In fact, the crazy shapes and chunky metal brackets are probably one of my favourite design features on this whole rig. Again, there's a crazy amount of adjustment available. The side mounts allow you to move your monitor back and forward across a range of about 30 centimeters, and you can mount the brackets anywhere up the vertical struts. Now there are two real negatives that I don't like about this solution. The first is that if you opt for the single monitor mount, you get a huge piece of extrusion to mount your monitor to. This piece of extrusion measures 1.2 meters across, and it's designed to allow you to add the triple monitor mounts onto it as well. However, if you're running a smaller monitor, you'll see this sticking out to either side of your screen, giving it weird looking ears, whilst simultaneously being a real pain in the ass when you're working on your rig, as it will always get in the way. Thankfully, I had a much smaller piece of extrusion laying around which I could mount to, so I didn't have to put up with this obnoxiously big bit of metal sticking out from my monitor. Now my second real annoyance is more to do with the vertical uprights rather than the monitor mount itself. Because the vertical pieces of profile stick up pretty high, they can actually stop you from lowering your monitor down to the correct position. You can see that I managed to position my monitor to be almost sitting on top of the uprights, but if I, for whatever reason, wanted to lower it further, my only option would be to push it back so it sits behind these vertical supports. You'll see that the seat I'm using is the Sim-Lab Speed 3 bucket seat. This is the exact same seat which I used on my Sim-Lab GT1 Pro, and I quite simply just transferred it over to this P1X Pro. The beauty of an aluminium profile sim rig is that you can really use any racing seat you have. If you're upgrading from a sim rig that you already own, you can certainly save some money by using your old seat. Now included with the P1X Pro are a set of 40x40 pieces of extrusion which you can mount any seat to. However, the seat brackets I have here aren't included with the P1X Pro, and neither is the seat slider. And you will almost certainly need to purchase these additional seat brackets if you don't already have a set yourself. Otherwise, it's virtually impossible to actually mount a seat to this thing. This seat costs around £350 or €390 depending on where you're ordering from, and is an all-in-one fiberglass bucket seat. And that leads to a few potential positives and some actual issues. First of all, there is zero adjustment in this seat. There's no recline, no bolster adjustment, and it only comes in one size. This will make it a tight fit for many, but me being 6'1", it's around spot on in size. Although even I would have preferred a touch more width at the top of my legs just to stretch a little bit in between races. Adding to that comfort is a really soft foam padding for the base of the seat and throughout the backrest. It's comfy to sit in for hours on end, but it's stiff enough not to sag or start to lose shape over time. Encompassing the entire front of the seat is a mesh fabric which actually feels pretty rough to the touch. This is because it features a open mesh stitching to aid breathability. During use, the seat is actually a pretty comfy place to spend time, and I didn't really feel any of the roughness from the mesh fabric at all. The Speed 3 seat certainly isn't the cheapest fiberglass racing seat around, but it's pretty par for the course in its pricing. I'd happily recommend it to you if you want to complete a full Sim-Lab look, and it even comes in a few colours if blue isn't your thing. Now I have touched on adjustability in each area already a little bit, but I wanted to say that this is probably one of the most adjustable sim rigs around. The pedal plate can move completely independently from the vertical supports, and none of the vertical supports mount into pre-drilled holes, which allows you to position it wherever you want along the base. The way that the monitor mounts are designed and the large seat mounting profiles let you adjust to almost any driving position. My main criticism with the adjustability is to do with the wheel mounting and that extra tall vertical strut, which can actually block some monitor positions, as I mentioned earlier. To move the wheel forward and back, you also need to move the whole vertical support, and if you've got the side mount already attached, that's a total of 10 bolts to loosen just to move your wheel forward or backwards. Now I want to get to the good bit and touch on the bit that really matters. Just how well does this Sim-Lab sim rig hold up while racing? When I reviewed the mid-level GT1 Pro a while back, it held up pretty well to my flex test, although when I started introducing stronger wheelbases, there certainly was some flex and vibration present. Now, I really tested this P1X Pro for flexing. I cranked my Acertech wheel right up to max to see if any flex was present at all, and as you can see here, there is nothing. No vibration, no flexing or movement in the frame at all. And for the first time ever, I think, my monitor isn't actually wobbling or shaking while I'm racing. Now, to emphasize the improvement in stability over the GT1 Pro, you can see me hitting the GT1 Pro pretty hard here, and very unnaturally I might add, but you can see just how much it moves. When I do the exact same thing to the P1X Pro, there's very little movement at all. And when we move to the pedal plate, we get a very similar story. This thing is rock solid. You can see me braking pretty hard with my Forte load cell pedals, and there's nothing, no movement at all, anywhere. Even when I really stomp unnaturally hard on the pedals, you won't see a single bit of movement anywhere along the frame. This is really helped by the fact that Sim-Lab uses extrusion instead of an actual pedal tray. Now, I've touched on compatibility a few times in this review, but it's worth noting that compatibility with almost all sim racing products is incredibly high. The new wheel deck has a lot of additional mounting holes which account for even new sim racing wheels like those from Acertech or Moser. And the pedal tray, or rather the two pieces of extrusion which sit where the pedal tray normally is, give you almost unlimited mounting options for your pedals. And with the Sim-Lab P1X Pro only costing around £150, $200 more than the GT1 Pro, this isn't a huge leap, especially taking into account the huge step up in terms of rigidity and quality. But stepping back at around £700 or $850, it's actually a pretty big investment, but it's one that you may never need to replace. There is no doubt in my mind that the P1X Pro can handle the most powerful sim racing equipment with relative ease. It doesn't even bat an eyelid with powerful direct drive wheels, giving it a huge scope to be a long-lasting sim rig. I would almost certainly expect to see sim racers using this sim rig in 10 years time, and it would still be one of the sturdiest rigs around. If you can afford its cost and overlook some of those minor negatives that I've mentioned throughout this review, it will repay you by being one of the very best aluminium profile sim rigs you can currently buy.